Hey there, handy friends. So today I want to share with you how to stock your worm bin. So I've emptied out my worm bin and I have my worms in my coconut coir. So I'm going to show you how I stock my worm bin and what I use. I cleaned out the worm bin and I just stashed the worms in with the coconut coir. See? See them all right there? Right on the top there. And so I am gonna add a little bit more moisture to this. Now I did make this from a brick, but it has dried out, so we can't have it that dry. It needs to be really moist like this. As you can see, I have a little bit of my old newspaper in here from my old castings that I cleaned out, and I put a layer of newspaper in the bottom because the worms, they like to lay their babies in the bottom in between the layers of the newspaper. So that's the first thing I'm gonna do. Well, the first thing I'm gonna do is get this guy out of here. He somehow snuck out of the bucket. I see there's another one over there. I'm gonna try to chase these worms down. There we go. There's always some stragglers. Okay, he fell through. I gotta get him out of there and get him in, corral him with the rest of them. Searching for water. Alright. So I got my bin. Now I'm gonna get a layer of newspaper down. We do save our rainwater, so that's what we have back here in this bucket, is a bucket of rainwater. So it looks a little bit dingy in the spray bottle, but it's just rainwater. Worms prefer the nutrients, so I'm gonna moisten my newspaper really well, because as you can see on the bottom I have my drain holes. Your worm bucket should always have the drain holes. I plan on doing another video going into more detail about how this worm vermicomposting bin was made. So anyway, this needs to be about a damp sponge, like a sponge. So not too wet, but not too dry. So again, this bottom layer is got holes, and my ingredients, my bedding is pretty dry, so I'm not too worried about that. Over here I have some corrugated cardboard that I have been soaking in my rainwater, and I normally would, oh, that's way too much water. Mistake. I'm gonna drain this right out of the bottom and then just empty the bottom out as I'm done. But anyway, I would normally cut this cardboard up a little bit, but I'm kind of in a hurry, so it's fine. Again, the worms are going to come on in and they're going to lay their eggs in between these layers here. They appreciate the glue, so kind of line it in the bottom there, and I'm trying to make a nice habitat for the worms. So one more layer here. They can come in that cardboard, break it down, and then lay their babies in between this material. So this material is this. This is like the bottom of the barrel here, broken down. This bucket here, this little bucket, I have my worm castings in here. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna continue to try to feed these and keep it moist in case there's babies in here, and sift it again, just trying to get all the worms out. And it's winter, so I don't really need these castings yet, so I'm gonna double check. I think I might have some eggs in there. Alright, so I've got my layers of little bit of cardboard and some newspaper. And now the next thing I'm gonna lay down is a layer of leaves. Now I have a huge pile of these out back, and the worms love them. And so I can use these all season long and kind of give my worms a natural habitat that's free to me. So these are really dry. I'm going to wet these down really well again. And I'd rather have it be a little bit too moist here because of my main ingredient, which I'll show you in a minute. Alright, now I have some shredded newspaper. Now sometimes with the leaves I'll throw in a little bit of dirt, but you never want to use potting soil. The shredded newspaper is fine. So I'm going to wet that really well again. And there's holes in the bottom, so whatever is not necessary is going to drain out. And like I said, my main ingredient is going to be really dry this time. So, kind of spread the love around here. Make sure we got it all moist. See how dry that gets. Now, I did have a paper shredder and it broke down, but that's ideally what you want to use for this. Make this process a lot easier. You don't always have to break it down, but it's a lot easier for your worms to process. So I do suggest, I've tried it both ways. I do like a layer on the bottom, and I swear by a layer on the top as well. So the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get my coconut coir into there, and that's what I'm discussing with you. As you can see, the difference in color and how dry it is. And this is another kind of like rough substance that the worms can appreciate for their gizzards that they have. Gizzards to digest their food, so they need a kind of like grit to help them digest, so like a hard substance. And this is from the coconut shell. This is coconut coir, coconut hair. And so I'm going to dump this in here. And this is my best ingredient that I found for the worms to love. And I've never used moss, mainly because the peat moss is known to not be sustainable, and so I choose not to use those kind of products. So you can see the worms are in here, and they're probably like, they're really dry. So the thing about this coconut hair is that it helps hold the moisture, and so it's really good for using in your plants too. And you know, coconut, it's become really popular for like coconut oil and coconut milk and stuff like that. And basically this is the byproduct being used, so it's sustainable in that way. Coconut is definitely like trending in a lot of different ways, and so this is a way that, you know, you can use the outer shell and the hair. And it's known very well to hold in moisture, so the worms love it for that reason too. And I love it for that reason because I have a dehumidifier down here in my basement, and this helps me to really maintain the moisture. So I was kind of digging around in here and it still seemed kind of dry. And literally dumping the water on there because I don't want it to be too dry. That's one thing you don't want. Dry them right out and that'll kill them. So I suggest to use the coconut coir while you got it wet. And my first video, I talk about how I wet it down from a brick. Just comes in like a brick, and then it makes like 8 quarts or something. It's great. It's cheap. So this is some scraps that I have in a little container here that I am going to add. And the coffee, this is a unbleached coffee filter. I prefer the unbleached, and as well as banana peel and another banana peel. Oops, don't want that in there. That's from like the little organic thing that holds them together. Okay. I graciously received a Vitamix from one of my really great new friends and co-YouTuber. I am my father's daughter, and I plan to start grinding up my eggshells prior to adding them because it will help them, the worms, grind down the, digest the egg through their gizzards faster. And so thank you very much, Heather Lynn, for that. And I plan on trying that next time. For right now, this is what we're adding, is just these eggshells that I'm just crushing up by hand. And then I have the remainder, the bottom of my barrel here, which I'm going to skip out on this banana peel. That's probably just too much at one time. And kind of crush these up by hand. So before I was like throwing them in there whole, and just takes forever for them to grind down these eggshells. But eggshells is definitely a recommendation that you need to add for calcium intake and to help the worms digest their food. There's also ground rock substance you can purchase, but I happen to have eggshells at home and like to use what I have on hand. And so what I found is, okay, that leaf's kind of dry, so I'm going to add a little more moisture here. What I found is that if you don't cover all of your food, then it will mold. So we don't want to have any mold in here. Mold sucks out moisture, and we want to retain the moisture. So I'm going to add the rest of some leaves here, try to get my food covered up, and this is going to get my worms kind of a head start. And then as I process our Thanksgiving dinner, we're vegetarians, so I'm going to have lots of scraps for these guys. And I'm going to make some homemade pumpkin puree, so I'm going to have some pumpkins for them. I also I'm going to have some apple peels and some stuff they really like, so I'm excited to share with them and give them their own Thanksgiving. And so I'm wetting this with my rainwater. I'm going to add a little bit more bedding on top with a newspaper, and I'm going to wet this substantially. And then after like a few days, this is going to be like half of this size. It just looks like it's all fluffed up and non-compressed, but as I continue to check it every day and add moisture to it, it's gonna like kind of like flatten out. And one thing, if you're having a problem with your bin, you always want to offer it ventilation. So I'm gonna wet this down substantially. I'm not gonna hold you hostage while I do that, but I want this to be like a damp sponge. So I want all my paper to be wet, and I'm gonna check this daily because I need to make sure that in the beginning I'm getting it to the appropriate moisture level, which is what I find kind of difficult and hard for the first few days to kind of figure out, like, okay, what I've added has enough moisture, it's retaining it, and then it'll kind of like even out and you don't have to add as much moisture. But that's how I add the bedding to my worm bin. And when I come back down here, and add some food after Thanksgiving, I'm just going to like peel this back to that layer where I've already added the food. And I'm going to add a little bit more, but not too much, because I want to make sure that they have time to process what I'm adding, so you don't want to overfeed. I also included that in a video that I did before. But I'm going to add some more food here, and then I'm going to cover this back up, and then I'm going to put a full another layer, a solid layer of newspaper on top there, just because they like it dark and there's a window nearby, and I like to keep my worms really cozy. And yeah, I find that it molds less when I put a full layer of newspaper on top. I do live in Michigan, and this is a Michigan basement, and it can get kind of damp, and I also have a dehumidifier, so it's a constant battle of trying to find the even keel. So yeah, this is our worm farm, and if you like what you see, don't forget to give me the thumbs up. Please subscribe and join me again. And also, I have some other great worm videos, and I also did recently a collab with I Am My Father's Daughter, and so you should check those videos out too. Thanks, friends. Stay handy.